In our first two conversations with Drs. Dave Myers and June Gruber, we explored how psychology can help level up what we teach and support learning. But today we're flipping the syllabus and asking, what happens when psychology transforms how we live? This episode is all about students, how they feel, how they function, and how understanding the science of things like stress, emotion, gratitude, and resilience might help them survive college and maybe even enjoy it. Welcome back to the What and Who of EDU, where we bring you insights from the leading educators, researchers, and innovators who are shaping the future of teaching and learning. I'm your host, Marissa Bluestone, and for this final part of our series, we're diving into the science of student well-being, how applying psychology can help students not just do well on a test, but flourish in their lives. Just a quick note before we begin. This episode includes discussion of student mental health and stress, and if that's not the right topic for you today, we completely understand, and we'll see you next time in a future episode. Welcome back, Dave and June. So glad to have you here again on the What and Who of EDU. Tell me, what are some ways that studying psychology actually improves students' lives and not just their test scores?
Psychology is such a unique and rich field. What you can learn in the classroom, there's really no way it can't transcend to your life and make it richer, make it more meaningful. I think ultimately allow you to live a better life. One of the examples that comes to mind when I think about how psychology can improve students' lives is when they learn about the science of well-being and the science of happiness. So, learning about the decisions you can make, the different habits you can foster, from how to be moving your body to healthy sleep habits to making choices around prioritizing social relationships. Like, learning these facts don't simply stay in a textbook, nor do they simply stay in the brick and mortar classroom, but these are things that inevitably spill into students' lives. And what we try to do, in our textbook and in the classes we teach is give students direct experiences that are going to show them how they can take the science of well-being into their own lives through activities that get them, rating their own well-being and seeing how that can change over time, or getting out of the classroom to go do what we call an awe walk, AWE, where they're out there trying these science-based activities to foster a sense of wonder and coming back in the class and saying how that made them feel. I have students read about the science of gratitude and gratitude journaling and then give it a go themselves. Part of what psychology can do and what we do with our students is, in fact, have them go out and do these behavioral experiments on their own experience and bring it to class with the idea that now they've not only learned a fact, but they've learned about how to implement it in their own lives, and that the idea is they'll take it way beyond the classroom itself.
Let me build on what June has just been saying. The hour before I sat down with you, Marissa, to have this recording session, I was sitting with some colleagues discussing teaching and our experiences with students. And colleagues were saying that students today sometimes seem only to want information that will help them score well on a test. That is, the only purpose of the class is to do well on the test. And what Dr. Gruber has just talked about is there are some deeper benefits to education than getting a good grade on a test. One can draw from psychological science some clues to how to live a flourishing life, how to think smarter, how to view others with greater understanding and compassion. And so I would just hope for students who are listening to this that you do well on exams, and boy, we want to support you in that, but also think more deeply about the purposes of education and draining from the educational experience you're having insights into life itself and into relationships and into secrets of human flourishing.
I think that's so important. And I think within the education community, we should also think about how are we measuring learning beyond those grades in a way to nurture and encourage that thinking that you were talking about. But Dave, another question. You often say that psychological science helps us to become wiser about how we think, feel, and act. How do you see that playing out in a student's life?
Well, how I see that playing out in the world today is helping students think smarter about how we think, feel, and act. Don't just depend on anecdote and story as a source of information or even your personal experience. If we want to know about what's really generally true, consider the data. Statistics may seem dry, but there's thousands of lives that lie behind that, and each one of those lives matter. So that's the biggest thing I would hope that students would take out of psychological science to become wiser, as well as to appreciate and savor the wonders of their own human existence and what enables us to flourish.
It is amazing when you think about all of it together. All right, I'm in awe just listening to you guys. But June, you've emphasized emotional diversity and the importance of experiencing a full range of emotions. How can that idea help students to navigate the stress of school life and beyond that?
I think appreciating emotional diversity is important for coping with unexpected life events that we wished were otherwise. I think in part, what emotional diversity can teach students is that there's a full range of feelings we're built with as human beings. We're built to experience joy and wonder, as well as sadness, anger, and sometimes fear and anxiety. And that not only are these a normal part of human existence, but in fact, the research shows that having a greater variety of emotions on a day-to-day basis helps keep us in tune with what's happening around us. We're not going to simply stay stuck on one emotional channel. And in fact, it can benefit our mental health. It can help us feel less depressed, have fewer physical health complaints, and have lower levels of anxiety and stress. So having different emotions is not only okay, it's actually healthy for us. So what I hope students take home from that is when you're feeling stressed out, not to be judging yourself and feeling like you should instead be having a plastered, smile on your face like what you're seeing in social media and what's getting shared online, but to tell yourself, I'm feeling stressed. It's okay to feel stressed. This is a normal part of being me and, experiencing some of the things that are going on. So just fostering a sense of acceptance and not pushing or suppressing feelings that are negative, and just learning to accept that you're going to have different emotions if you're going to be a human being. And that's perfectly normal and healthy.
So what I'm hearing you say, June, is that students shouldn't strive to be happy all the time. Not only is it not realistic, but it's not healthy for them overall.
That's correct. And the more students even strive to be happy, research in what's called the paradoxical pursuit of happiness shows that sort of incessant pursuit or quest to be happy actually backfires for young adults. They end up feeling less happy in certain social positive circumstances and may even be at greater risk for becoming more anxious and becoming more depressed. So letting the striving for happiness, put it to the side and let that quest end.
It's part of positive psychology. I got to know Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and one of his messages was that if you can find a purpose and a mission that engages you in the flow of life where you lose track of time because you're so caught up in something you're doing, it might be an athletic pursuit, but it might be some significant vocational purpose, as I bet you sometimes, June, experience when you're writing or teaching or doing research where you're just so absorbed in what you're doing and the purposefulness of it. You're living beyond self at that point, as you're describing. You're not focusing on yourself. You're focusing on something greater. And that experience of flow is also a great feeling.
Dave, what role do optimism and gratitude play in student well-being, and how can educators encourage students, or how should students develop these strengths without sounding like a TED Talk?
Well, one thing students can do is be encouraged just to put certain virtues into practice. Optimism is maybe a tough one, but one can work at thinking about positive possibilities as well as the dark side of things. Gratitude is easier to put into practice. June, I wager you've probably had some gratitude exercises in some of your teaching about the psychology of well-being and happiness. People can make a practice of writing a gratitude note to somebody. Might be an email, might be a message, or just in their daily life, expressing genuine thanks. If there's one virtue that I have, and I have many faults, but if I have one virtue, it's that I am all the time feeling so grateful to other people, and I make a practice of telling them that. And it seems to be, lifts me up, and I'm guessing it lifts other people up too. June, do you integrate gratitude into your teaching?
Absolutely. Both in terms of like sharing the amazing science of gratitude, inducing gratitude in the lab helps people feel better, have more kind of soothing physiological reactions, and also outside of the lab doing these diary or journaling exercises. I encourage my students to try the gratitude exercises for a week and to think of 3 things they're grateful for each day and come back and share what that was like. And it's always so fun and so surprising for students to learn that it's easier than they think. And in fact, they end up remembering things from their day that they might otherwise have overlooked or forgotten by simply taking a moment, pausing, and reflecting on what they're grateful for.
I love that. Anything else on gratitude or self-compassion or acceptance that students can use to understand what doing that and how it differs from just feeling good?
One of the things I love about self-compassion as an exercise that students can try is to model being kind to themselves the same way they would to another person. So taking this kind of third-person perspective where they're one giving advice to a friend or a close loved one who's going through a stressful time, and then to take that exercise and kind of flip the script and practice it on themselves. Because often students are taught and practice being kind to other people, but very rarely do they get that opportunity and to see the beauty of the evidence behind it of being kind to yourself, or what we think of as self-compassion, and the benefits it can have for themselves. And it can also allow them to be more accepting of a range of emotions they're going to have, or accepting that we all make mistakes, that we're not perfect in every interaction, that we're not performing the best in every, exam in class, and to accept the inevitable diversity of feelings and experiences that are going to come their way.
Dave, I'll kick it over to you. What are some psychological findings that students often resist, but later come to appreciate?
I think one set of findings that students are coming to appreciate today, maybe after resisting, is the findings of research on the effects of social media and excessive smartphone use. The research shows several things. Number one, as John Haidt and Jean Twenge, my social psychologist colleagues, have documented, as smartphones came into our lives and took more and more hours of our time, rates of adolescent and young adult depression and anxiety and suicide ideation soared. Maybe that was just a coincidence. That's a correlation. Secondly, in the times and specific cities where this came in, we see those rates increasing at that time. Third, we see an association between the number of excess hours a student spends on social media, particularly, by the way, this is especially true of teen girls. So 2 or 3 hours a day is one thing, but 5 or 6 hours a day is another thing. And we have experiments in which people are put on social media diets or not, and we see the effect of that on their well-being and their flourishing. All this evidence converges. It all tells the same story, that social media is interesting, it's helpful to some extent if it's well managed, but it can be toxic on our emotions if not, as we compare with others who are presenting themselves in cool ways, as we sleep less, as we engage in less face-to-face interaction. And I see this in classes. I remember guest lecturing for a colleague recently who had a long 75-minute class with a 5-minute break in the middle. I used to teach like that, and the break would be a social time. The break came, everybody whips out their phones and silently is staring at their phone. Or I see in the dining hall, or people walking across campus, not looking at other people, but looking at their phones as they walk across campus. And that research, I think, has now started to get through because a lot of people are thinking about the need to manage intentionally for their own benefits their use of social media and their prioritizing of face-to-face engagement with other people and of sleep and of reading and other life goals.
Any psychology-based tips for students to help them kind of pare down their social media use, Dave?
Yeah, or at least manage it so it's intentional. So that, I mean, how do you want to use your time? What goals do you want to have? What kind of relationships do you want to have? And then to manage your time intentionally, accordingly. So you live the life you want, but you've got to plan it.
And June, what do you think? Are there any psychological findings that you find that students are resisting but eventually come around to?
I think one of the findings that has an initial resistance to it is the idea that not all stress is bad, right? We equate stress as something that we should manage, in a way that we should minimize it or avoid it. And I love to teach students that stress is a broader construct or idea than we realize, and that there's a difference between what we call intermittent acute stress, which is getting ready for, maybe it's a big exam, or maybe you're giving a performance or training for a half marathon, like something that has a beginning and an end, but has some stress involved. That's the kind of stress that we need not avoid or shy away from, and that certain types of stressful experiences can actually build our resilience, can give us exposure, allow us to foster emotional diversity and build psychological resilience in the long run. But to separate that from the kind of stress we know is deleterious, we know is bad, which is the chronic stress, the one that persists over long periods of time and you don't get a chance to get a break or breathe from it. But teaching students that there's different kinds of stress, and not all stress is to be avoided, right? Some stress can be a healthy challenge, and how to separate that from the kind of stress that can really be toxic for them and take a toll on their mental and psychological and physical well-being.
June, how do they do that? Are there any evidence-based strategies that can help students to make that differentiation?
That's a great question. So how do we know when something's toiling on for too long versus where, something is an opportunity for challenge? And I think that's an interesting question that you need to think about as a student when you're asking yourself, like, is this a stressor that has an end in sight? And what opportunities might this give me to push myself to grow or even challenge myself? If the answers to those questions are that this is, a context that has no foreseeable end, that there's no possibility to learn or grow, then I might start thinking about, might that be a context that needs to be shifted?
June's lesson is also important to parenting because there's a lot of people emphasizing the value of stress. To protect your children from stress and from life experiences, not to prepare them to live. It's part of life. And so the ups and downs, the rejections, the disappointments, and so forth, it's all part of our growth.
I just completely agreeing with Dave that I think this is something important across the lifespan, to not shy away from the varieties of experiences we're going to encounter. Some of them are going to be hard. Some of them are going to be, as Dave mentioned, feelings of rejection, of pain, of hurt. But that doesn't mean it's something we have to hide from or avoid. That there is a range of human experiences that are part of the experience of being human and can build growth and resilience for us the next time we encounter a challenge or a stressor.
Now you're talking about a range of experiences. Do you think today's student is feeling it and experiencing it in a different way than students of generations past have? And is there any research that speaks to that? And June, I'll kick that off with you.
I do think today's generation of college students are experiencing a different world, and as a result, maybe having different psychological experiences. This is, in fact, one of the things that my research lab is studying right now. We are doing a 6-year follow-up. This is a NSF-funded grant where we are tracking students who started college right before the pandemic started and looking at how that has impacted them over time. I think this is important because today's generation of college students have endured a very different kind of social and emotional landscape than their peers before. Many of them have gone through the pandemic where there was abrupt disruption in their social lives and are now working on how do we repair and rebuild those social communities, and how do we do that in a world where there's increasing reliance on social media and technology that's taking the place of those social connections. I think young adults are also facing times of different kinds of uncertainty in the world and different kinds of stressors that may also contribute to what we're seeing as elevated rates of serious mental health challenges, from anxiety and depression to substance use and the like, and are needing to be better equipped to have awareness of what mental health concerns are and find creative ways to help support them around mental health that include traditional psychotherapies, but also thinking outside of the box too of other strategies that we can bring in parallel to support their well-being in totality, and to not only focus on reducing symptoms, but actually building a purposeful, meaningful life where they can flourish. So on the one hand, I do think our students have endured a unique set of stressors, and there is a sense of mental vulnerability. At the same time, I see this cohort as one of remarkable advocacy, of speaking out and speaking about mental health, being more aware than ever before, and really asking from the world for a future that's going to support who they are. So I think the future is very bright in their hands, and they're holding a lot more than previous generations have.
All right, last question. And I'm going to ask both of you, but I'll start with Dave. What is one insight from psychology that's helped you the most in your own life or work, and that you hope that students will carry with them long after the class ends?
One thing psychology does is really help me think in terms of evidence rather than anecdote when understanding human experience. But if I had to pick one concept, it might be the concept of resilience. Bad and good things happen to us all, and they happen to me too. And when bad things happen, something gets rejected that I had a lot of hopes in, a child is suffering, whatever. I feel a heaviness, I feel a weight, but I also know that it's not going to last forever. The half-life of that negative emotion is going to be relatively short. And I guess that maybe helps me not be depressed, because if you're depressed and something bad happens, you tend to think it's going to go on forever. There's nothing I can do about it. It's all my fault. And so understanding our capacity for resilience helps me when bad things happen and I'm really down, at least to know in the back of my mind, I'm not going to be down forever.
June, how about you?
This was just such a good question. I was like going through all these possibilities, but one insight from psychology that I've kept in my own life and has helped me support others, as a teacher, researcher, clinical psychologist, is to remember that humans are capable of change and growth. We're not fixed. We're malleable. We can work on changing mindsets that aren't serving us. We can even grow to become more empathic. And if we're suffering in significant ways, there's hope for change. So knowing that human beings are a work in progress and we're more malleable than we think, that mindset has always helped me think about how to support students through tough times, how to get through challenging periods in my own life. And I think why psychology is so important is it is teaching us strategies that can help us grow and change and become better versions of ourselves.
A sincere thanks to Dave and June for helping us see that psychology can be the ultimate college survival skill. More like something students live than something they need to study. Though, in all fairness, they do still need to do that. From gratitude journals to all walks, this episode pulled back the curtain on student well-being. And it turns out the goal isn't to be happy all the time. It's to understand what you're feeling, why it matters, and how to move through it with curiosity, instead of judgment. And that wraps up our 3-part series with Drs. Myers and Gruber, exploring how psychology can shape teaching, learning, and now living. If you haven't listened to earlier episodes yet, we'd love for you to go back and explore the full conversation. You'll find links, resources, and maybe even a little bonus nugget of wisdom in the show notes. And if you found this podcast to be informative or beneficial, take a quick second to leave a 5-star review or share this episode with a friend. Reviews are going to help others find our show and help us to continue creating more episodes just like this one. I'm Marissa Bluestone, and this is the What and Who of EDU. Thanks for listening and for being part of the conversation about what it means to learn, teach, and thrive in the classroom.